96 Dodge 12 valve, 97 Ford 7.3 Powerstroke. Old iron or legendary rigs? That's a subjective question, but regardless of that, we're going to compare the two. Why? Because these trucks are still in play. These are still highly sought after, highly discussed, and we're going to put them up head to head right now. And this episode is actually the third installment in the Versus series that I've been kind of working on throughout the year. If you didn't catch those, the other two are Old School versus New School was the first one, and 3500 chassis cab versus 5500 chassis cab was the second one. Right here, go to my video archive to find those. I'm Bobby J, welcome back to the channel. Yep, 97 Ford. 7.3 Powerstroke ZF5 5-speed, 96 Dodge 12 valve automatic 2500. So we're going to compare these two trucks today. Now what's interesting is the reason why we're doing this is because, see, these two trucks, if you step back in time, these two trucks very well, this could have still been left on the lot as in that late 96. This could have just hit the Ford dealership as a early 97, and they could have very well been across the street from one another. And you walking from each dealership trying to figure out, do I want the Ford or do I want the Dodge? Well, we're going to get into the ins and outs of these two trucks and give you some real information, some accurate information on both of them, and dive right into them. Now, one more thing before we jump into this comparison. Yeah, if you follow my channel, you know that this is a Dodge channel. I'm a Dodge guy. But I want to give both of these trucks, the Ford included, the respect, unbiased, and fair. It just looks like it would smell in there. Comparison that it deserves. No, in all seriousness, okay, all seriousness, no. Really, we are going to compare these trucks in a fair manner and an unbiased manner, regardless if I'm a Dodge guy. I've had this truck for a long time, actually, and it has served me well. So it is going to get a fair, unbiased, and balanced recognition here in this video. Let's jump into it. Okay. '97 Ford OBS. Old school gauges, old school controls. Everything about this truck is very old school feeling. Door panels, bench seat, everything about this truck has a very classic feel. And that's probably the number one thing with the OBS Fords. They were the last to hold out with that classic rig with the rib down with the rib down the hood. We've got wing windows. We've got more of a classic dash. Now, over the years, Ford tried to continually update this truck to be a little bit more modern. So the flip side is, you know, if you're really into the classic trucks, this is probably the fanciest classic truck you can get because of the fact that it went all the way into 97 and it was trying to compete with the new rigs that had come out, which from Chevrolet all the way back in 1988 with their new design, Of course, the second gen Dodge that hit the dealer lots in '94 that was came by storm. Yeah, like I said, the overall feel being a very classic feel, so does the interior room. Now, both of these trucks in comparison are regular cabs, which is good. And me being a big dude at 6'4" and 215, I honestly don't feel like I fit well in this truck. I'm extremely close to the steering wheel. I am close to the roof. Yeah, the headliner's sagging in the old girl, but that's all right. But still, regardless of that, there's the head, there's it pushed all the way up. There's the top of my hat. I don't fit in. This old bench seat down here is beat to death. And when I move over to the passenger seat, where it's a little fresher over there, well, I'm touching the roof. So that is, and the space from the dash itself to my body, if you can see this, there is just not a lot of room here in this truck. It is a compact feeling as compared to maybe not like a square body Chevy or, you know, a first gen, but this truck, it is definitely a compact feel. Now my 94 or 95, that truck, same thing, very compact. Now the next thing is ride quality, road noise, ride quality. You know, this truck is not bad in noise level, considering it being a classic cab and everything. It's not bad. Going down the road, there's a fair amount of wind noise and whatnot. Of course, this truck is pretty old, but it is definitely not quiet like a second gen. And even the Chevy, the newer chassis of the Chevy that was in competition with this truck at the time, I will definitely say that. Now, ride quality. This is, for some people, a big deal. Now, my F350 that I had that was the 95, it was a bucking Bronco. Now, it was a chassis cab truck, but it was an F350, four-wheel drive dually. That truck rode like crap. I feel like I should mention my other OBS Powerstroke that I had. I had this one for a little while, and it was an okay truck. I had a lot of fun with it. I purchased it not running, put it back together, and got it back on the road, and put quite a few miles on it. Now, this one, we're not going to get into, because this is a Class 4 truck. This is an F Super Duty, so this is technically the early F450, and yeah, it rides absolutely terrible too. So it's not a fair comparison to the 2500 non-camper special Dodge, but I can tell you the F250s, all of them, they're all leaf spring. They're all leaf spring in the front, and you just can't get the ride quality out of a factory leaf spring like you can a coil suspension. The other thing is the Ford TTB front end setup on the four-wheel drives. That thing was a nightmare. Yeah, it was that was a terrible design, straight from the start. And I know a lot of people had problems with that. The F350 that had the solid Dana 60 in the front, that was the truck to have, not the F250 with the TTB. That's where we're at on ride quality. Like I said, interior feel, very classic, very compact, not a lot of room to stretch out. The bench seat, I personally don't find to be all that comfortable in this truck. But I will give it definitely this. This truck has always been very good with the air conditioner, the heat, and the AC. I haven't had hardly any trouble under the dash with that. And that is kind of classic Ford, I believe. And I didn't have any trouble with my 95 either. Now, power. Let's get on to that. Power and drivetrain. The old 7.3 Powerstroke. Let me tell you what I think about a 7.3 Powerstroke. I was actually pretty excited to get this truck. This was the first one that I got, and I had already had Dodges, a number of Dodges, knew them quite well, their power band and all that. And you know, different cowboys and stuff, oh gosh dang, that 7.3 Powerstroke, best engine God ever created. Well, I found this truck. I wanted the bed with the crane and all that. It came with this truck underneath it, so I got it. And I bought it not running. So I got it running, and I took it for the first test drive, and I thought there was something wrong with it. And because it had no power, hardly. Below 1800 RPM, there wasn't jack there. These early first generation Powerstrokes, they do not have good power below 1800 RPM. I don't care what. This truck has a 6-way flip chip in it, and it helps moderately. But the bottom line is, these trucks have a power band about that wide, and they do good after 1800 RPM, and they're starting to fall off at about 2600. It's done. It's done. It's not a big top end motor either. So now the ZF5 transmission that's found behind the Powerstroke, that's actually, I personally like that 5-speed. I think that's a pretty good transmission. It shifts smooth. It doesn't have a whole lot of problems, I think, overall. You know, the comparison in the Dodge, the NV4500, was no bulletproof transmission. Better than the old Get Rag, but no bulletproof transmission. Now, some of that can kind of come down to theory of power output going into the front of them and what they had in front of them, maybe. But, you know, there's some rowdy Powerstrokes out there. There were some rowdy Powerstrokes. And the old ZF5, I think, it did all right. It's done all right. And, you know, some specs on the 7.3, for those that aren't aware, it uses the Huey injection system, and also was found in the later 6.0. And that was a design that was worked out with it was a Caterpillar design, somehow International, Navistar. They brought it over to their hut and started using it on their engines, and this was the debut. Now, I will say, in '94, when word came down that this engine, the new Navistar T444E, was going to be coming into the replacing the old 7.3 IDI, which has nothing to do with the Powerstroke. When word was coming down that this engine was coming out, there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, because this engine, for the time frame, had a lot of technology in it. You're talking about computer-controlled injectors, controlled by the injector driver module. And it's kind of like a common rail design, sort of, but not as good. The oil-driven injectors, you know, there's a high-pressure oil pump. That high-pressure oil pump is charged by the main oil pump down below. Like I said, it was kind of a big jump in technology at the time. Is it better than a 12-valve? Well, that's subjective, but like I said, it was definitely a leap in technology. In today's standards, no, it's not very good. The whole oil-driven, hydraulically driven injector deal, not that great, in my opinion. But do they do well in these trucks? Yes, they do. These trucks do really well. Injectors last 200,000+ miles without a whole lot of trouble. And these are good running engines. They are performers in longevity, and they don't have a lot of problems. I think they have some cam sensor issues, but I think the turbos, the injectors, the long block itself are very reliable, very robust. And now, moving over to the performance side of things, that's where the early Powerstroke is, I think, definitely lacking. Like I said, I have a 6-position flip chip in this truck, and it is not all that different from when it's completely off. It was just the out of the box with the tunes that it comes with, and it was all about custom tuning with these 7.3s. So I ordered from HP Tuners another flip chip with custom tunes to what I was going to use in that truck, and that chip was that much better than the stock TS 6-position chip. I've never been impressed by the power performance capability of a 7.3. The biggest issue with them is the small injectors. The single shot AA injectors that are found in pretty much all of the early OBS Powerstrokes, they just can't flow a lot of fuel. That's the bottom line. And some people try to say their max is about 300 crank horsepower. So outside of that, then you got to start changing injectors. That's the number one. And that's expensive. Injectors for this truck is very costly. We're talking common rail prices for injectors. And from there, once you do get the bigger injectors in them, then you start running into other issues. I think there's oil pump issues of being able to keep up past a certain horsepower level, and whatnot. And the other thing is I will say, I'll throw one more thing in about these early trucks, especially if you have the 5-speed. This turbo is non-wastegated. This engine is big, obviously 7.3. I think that the original idea behind this engine was, yes, being turbocharged and built as a turbocharged engine, but to maybe rely more on its flat out cubic inch size rather than producing a lot of boost, as compared to the Cummins power plant that really relied on boost and that turbo power, because this engine doesn't make a lot of boost. So that's kind of where it's at performance wise, and because of that, with it being a non-wastegated turbo, it is pretty laggy with the 5-speed. It is a slow spooling turbo. So that's kind of the rundown on the old 7.3 OBS. So now a 96 Dodge 2500 we got here. Now, this is a whole new design. This would be on its 3rd production year on the 2nd gen, and this is a totally new truck. First thing you notice is the door's completely different as compared to an OBS. It has that new truck feel, the way that handles, the way they feel, the way the door sounds. And getting settled in here, the very first thing you really notice jumping from that truck to this truck is how much more leg room there is. Way more leg room. Guy, like I said, me being 6'4", I so much appreciate that. I am so cramped in the OBS Ford, and this cab is without doubt is longer. Gauge cluster is larger than in the Ford. Again, this dash, we're just, this is a newer style dash with a newer style cab. Again, this kind of comes down to subjective, if this is something you like more. Door panel, much nicer door panel for the most part. We're looking, no more bench seat. We've got a center console, which, yes, I believe that like the crew cab OBSs, I think they had a more of a 60-40 split. Very comfortable. This truck is, very quiet for its time anyway. Very quiet inside. The seats are comfortable. The air conditioner works good in this truck. Heater works good. Now, yep, Dodge. I have had trouble with this one too, with issues with the HVAC system. Unfortunately, there's just Dodge has had trouble with that stuff. That is definitely, Ford has Dodge edged out when it comes to issues under the dash. Headroom, look at this. Yeah, what is that? Shoot, there's 3 inches above my head. And again, this makes this truck so much more comfortable. And I mean, regardless of maybe if you prefer Ford or you prefer Chevy or whatever, if you're a big guy and you were walking around in 96, 1997, trying to decide which truck you were gonna buy, this is a huge factor. And partly probably why the 2nd gen Dodge was such a hit in 94 and on when it came out. This cab is way better. Now, drivetrain wise, it is no doubt from a technology standpoint that the old trusty P-pump 12 valve was falling behind in 2 categories. Technology. Second thing is horsepower. Okay, what was it, 180 horsepower? I think the biggest P-pump was 215 with the stick, but that was in the 97, 98 range. So with the automatic, I think the best you could do was 180 horsepower. And so, get up and go. The old Powerstroke rated at 215 and then later 225, I would say in some ways had an edge on the 12 valve. The 12 valve obviously is so much easier to work on as compared to the Powerstroke. Injectors are a fraction of the cost as a Powerstroke, and they last just as long, if not longer, than the ones in the Powerstroke. P-pump, pretty much almost indestructible if taken care of. And The turbo is wastegated, it spools quick, that was kind of a big deal. You know, in those days, you're going from older stuff, you go into the first gen Dodge of the H1C, and then the H1CW wastegated. You know, this was technology advancement, was going from a non-wastegated to a wastegated turbo, and it made a difference. And you had then, right, the NV 4500 5-speed, or you had the 47RE in the 96 moving forward, 47RH in the 94, 95. You know, the E40D was a pretty good transmission for the most part. Yeah, it had trouble, but behind the Powerstroke, which was not an overly torquey and was computer controlled, computer managed is what I should say, there ain't no torque control, torque management, nothing in a 12 valve. So there's, you know, there's an aspect there of why some of the early trucks had more automatic trouble than even some of the later Dodges. Now, stock for stock, the old 12 valve is kind of known as maybe a little bit of a dog, and some of that is true. It's no snappy powerhouse engine, and its power band though is around 1400. It starts to roll in, but 2300, it's wanting to run out of steam. That's still better than the old Powerstroke. You still got a little bit more range there, and that's what, and most importantly, it's down low where it counts. If you've got a 5-speed in these trucks, and I know because that truck is heavy, a truck weighs 13,000 pounds and has a 5-speed. If you got one of these with a 5-speed and you're loaded down heavy, you've got that torque. When you shift and that turbo spools and it comes alive, you got power down low. That truck struggles every time you shift and you bring those RPMs way down. It struggles to climb back up into a range where it wants to be, where you don't have to wait with the 12 valve because it's the opposite. It doesn't like the upper end range. You just shift to the next gear and put it right back in where it's happy. That's the advantage of a 12 valve, I think, over that engine. And getting into the performance stuff. So, power. It's pretty much not even hardly negotiable about the 12 valves power potential. And I'm going to put that in power potential in two categories, okay? First one, all out drag racing, sled pulling monsters, chewing out the hood stack. Yeah, 12 valve is going to walk all over any 7.3, right? Especially back in that day when people were not talking today, but back in the early 2000s when all this stuff was what guys could do then. Now, the second one though is bang for your buck performance wise. Like I said, the old 7.3 with a flip chip, I was not impressed with that. It did not make all that much of a difference. A 12 valve, you slide the fuel plate forward or take the fuel plate out, make some timing adjustments, maybe change that Mac plug, do a couple different things. You 12 valve guys really know how to make these things run. Delivery valves, all. You guys can make these trucks run, man. And with not much money, you can make this engine perform from 1400 RPM to 4000 without spending an absolute fortune. You can make this engine make 400 horse, right? And spend 4,000 RPMs, darn near, or at least let's say 3,500 easy, for what it costs, or maybe even less what it costs for a set of reman stock injectors for that 7.3. So with all that said, what is the better truck? Well, to disappoint you, you decide. That's the truth. Because if one was really better than the other, or that one was better than that, they would have sold them all and they would have sold none of them. That's the truth right there. You know, there is advantages in each one of these trucks. You know, if you go back to that time frame, like we're kind of trying to focus on here, a little bit of a time travel, is if you're really into the legend status of Ford throughout the years, and you like the classic comfortable feel that you knew with Ford, it's without question that was the truck for you. But you know, if you were tired of the old and you wanted to get into a more modern rig that had some of this, you know, Chevy had been doing it since '88. We're not even talking about Chevy really, but the truth is they came out with a completely modern pickup in 1988. Now, their diesel engine sucks, but you know, par for the course. There's the modern truck right there. That's what put Dodge back on the map. And another question is, which one is better looking? Well, again, you tell me. Put in the comments, tell me which one you think is the better looking truck. Now for me, yeah, it's the second gen. Second gen Sport. It's one of the sexiest rigs still to this day that's ever been manufactured, in my opinion. But that is throwing a little bit of biased opinion in. Now, the truth is though, either one of these power plants are good engines. You know, throughout the years, Ford has always tried to edge themselves out on top power-wise. You know, Dodge is coming strong with the torque numbers, but the horsepower numbers, just look at today. Look at today. 500 horsepower stroke. Can't believe it hardly, right? In those days of the early second gen and the last of the OBS, these two trucks, this truck had more power on paper. Now, suspension-wise, that's a whole different ball game. Dodge, even with track bar problems and different problems like that, that was the comfortable riding truck right there. Good performing front end, good reactive suspension. You know what I'm saying? You know, modern feeling steering. That truck is just a more modern rig to drive. There's no doubt about it. So all in all, the bottom line is, if you're in the price range of some of these older trucks, you can't afford the newer rigs, which is very understandable. Or you're just into these older trucks, you can't go wrong with either one of these. Now for me, I will pick a pony, and it is, big surprise, right? It is the Dodge, because the 12 valve is such a potent power plant, and the looks of it, like I said, the way it rides and everything, that's the better truck for me. Reliability standpoint, yeah, the old Ford is maybe a little bit more reliable. And I'm going to hinge that on one thing. Issues under the dash. Yeah. If you manage to make it through life with no issues with your HVAC in a second gen Dodge, you're pretty lucky. Fords, they do a little bit better in that category. So there it is. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Which truck do you pick? Which truck, if this was 1996 or 7, what truck would you be walking in to sign papers on? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, and we will see you on the next one, which might be quite interesting. Very close to this comparison.